Do mene je prodrl glas. Si že budna? Ležala sem točno na sredini, kot na del. Zraven mene bi lahko ležalo 5 deklet. Pomislila sem, da tako živijo bomboni v šumečih ovojih, dokler jih ne pojedo kakšna usta. Sčasoma bi zgodba zbledela kot vse druge, o tem sem prepričana. Vedela sem, vem, da ima vsaka stvar svojega gospodarja. Vsak gospodar ima pesti, past. Preizkusili bi me radi, zmedli. Mesto ni bilo kraj, ampak kazen. Prišla sem, da bi bila tepena namesto vseh drugih. Ni me bilo strah. Sem se pa vseeno vprašala, kakšni so meščani v resnici.
Dobro večer. Moje ime je Mojca Malec in moja naloga je danes, da vas popeljem čez to uro srečanja. Ampak kadarkoli stojim takole pred publiko s knjigo v rokah, sem vedno malo razdvojena. Namreč kot novinarka bi sedaj napovedala pisateljico, rojeno leta 1978 v Moldaviji, potem se je ukvarjala z novinarstvom, 10 let delala v tiskanih medijih, na televiziji, se preselila v Pariz, začela pisati, izdala 2 romana, ki sta postala uspešnici. Ampak sem tudi bralka. In kot bralka bom napovedala pisateljico, ki piše tako kruto, a hkrati nežno. Tako brutalno, vendar ne zelo čutno. In njena prva knjiga, Poletje, v katerem je moja mama imela zelene oči, prebirala sem jo, ko sem izgubljala svojega očeta in dala mi je neverjetno veliko ljubezni in bila je svojevrstna terapija, ki mi je pomagala morda premagati vso to žalost, jezo, ko se je približevala smrt. Danes nas bo popeljala v prav posebno mesto. Odprli bomo kar nekaj vrat stanovanj, kjer živijo nenavadni, zanimivi ljudje. Malo bo tudi zadišalo po strahu, po smrti, ampak tudi po brezovem soku, pa po milu, s katerim glavni junakinji redno izpirata steklenice. Veste, so knjige, ki jih prebereš in potem si takoj zaželiš, da bi rad spoznal avtorja. Danes v rokah držim tako knjigo. Prelistali bomo skupaj roman Stekleni vrt in z nami je avtorica Tatiana Țîbuleac. Tatiana, please. Welcome. Audience, Tatiana.
Yes.
That's a good start.
Well, thank you for coming, all of you.
Yes, and you know, we have one thing in common. We used to be both journalists. You used to be a journalist as well, so we're actually more used to ask questions rather to answer them. Is it still difficult for you talking about your work, the stories you've written down?
Well, it's a different kind of work now, because I think that being a journalist requires one set of abilities and writing a book another. If you asked me, I preferred to be a journalist in the sense of it was easier, because you have a microphone and, as you said, you are the one who usually asks questions, and even if people ask you something, you always feel shielded by the microphone, by the profession, while when you are writing a book, everyone knows that it's you, it's not an institution, it's a person who wrote it, and then of course everyone wants to know whether it's you in the book, how much of you is in the character. So
Exactly.
you have two choices, or to lie or to be honest.
And you have to explain and explain and explain yourself again and again. So yeah, and journalists can sometimes really ask annoying questions. So I try to do my best today, and I try to be a reader most of the time.
Well, we might, have different roles. I might ask questions as well.
But Tatiana, you've been translated now into so many languages, into Slovenian as well. We will hear some extracts in our language as well from your book. But as a journalist, maybe you can do like a short summary what your book is really about, because we have lots of readers with us tonight, but maybe some people who haven't read your book so far.
When my first book was translated in a first language internationally, I learned never to answer this question properly, because everyone is reading books differently. And usually the answers coming from readers are more interesting than I'm giving one. So if I will tell you what is this book about, it will probably not be only about that, or it will be about completely different. But shortly, for those who haven't decided yet whether to buy it or not, it's a book about a girl and the country. It's about a story of a simple, small person who is growing up in the country, who is small and is becoming independent. It's a book which will take you back into the Soviet Union. I know that most of you haven't been there, but it will still take you. And it will describe probably the last 10 years before Soviet Union collapsed. And it's about how people struggle, how people have to choose all the time between two languages, two identities, between love and hate for a language, between one direction or another. It's a book about struggling. It's a book about accepting who you are, or on the contrary, fighting with who you became. It's also a book about migrants, because when I wrote it, I was already a migrant, because I moved to Paris for 14 years. And that is simple to say, but more difficult probably to accept that you are a migrant and you are a bit from everywhere and nowhere.
Like you said, there are so many different ways how to read and understand your story. And basically it's about the girl and her adoptive mother who are collecting bottles, selling them. But for me it was very hard at the beginning to decide who's the main character, because there are so many points where I could start and fall in love with the story and some parts of the story. And I think a very good way of reading the book is, I was focusing on languages, maybe because myself,
you travel a lot.
I travel, yeah, but languages are very important, and I think there's lots of character and destiny and history in one language. And I really loved it, the way you use language to describe these notions as well. The Russian, which in a way is in bold letters as well in this book. It's different than the other text. It's maybe more harsh, more strict, direct, like the mother. And then you have the Romanian, maybe the safe house, a place to feel comfortable, maybe the language of friendship, which is the language of Lastochka.
I'm glad you mentioned the language, because I think that in this book, the language itself is a character. I'm not going to bore you with a story of Moldova. I think that you can find it later on if you want. But just shortly to introduce you a bit into this topic, more than half a decade, half a century, we had an invented language for the Republic of Moldova, which you know today, because we had historically our language is Romanian, but because of Soviet occupation, we had to write our language with a Russian alphabet. Just make this mental exercise, like having Slovenian language, but from tomorrow to be forced to write it, I don't know, with Chinese letters. So you can imagine what does that make for an identity for a person who suddenly wakes up in another language, or suddenly wakes up with the idea that their language it doesn't exist, or it's not important enough, or it's a second-hand language. So it can't be easy even for a month. But imagine what happens when you have decades, when you grow up with that language, when you have a profession in that language. So this is what happened briefly. I forgot your question, but I will.
No, it's great. No, it's
I will still answer. I will still answer. Yes. So,
but
the
it's
language.
great that you put a bit of a context, because this is something that is happening now with Ukraine as well, and the Ukrainian language, which actually didn't exist years ago, and now suddenly the Ukrainian identity. Well, it didn't exist for us in this part
Yes.
of the world. It did exist.
Correct.
It did exist. But I remember my first visit to Kiev some years ago. The young people didn't speak it. Now it's very important to be Ukrainian and to have this language and to hear it. So it's good that you give us a bit of a context what's happened to the Romanian language as well.
Yes,
in Moldova.
because also you should keep in mind that that forced language, which is Moldovan, it wasn't given to us just like that, but it was given to us on purpose, just to keep us separated from Romania, because the idea was that people who live there, they never feel that they're part of Romania, that they are part of something else, whatever it is, but it wasn't Russia or Romania. So I think it's this idea of growing up with a false language and leading a life which you know that doesn't really fit anywhere. So Moldovan story is probably not unique in that way. This happens a lot to small countries, and let's not go so far. I mean, Romania in that time didn't do better in many other ways, because they had Ceausescu, they had Securitate, they had bad time, let's put it smoothly. But they had their language, while we had other things, but we didn't have a language. So yes, you see, a long answer for your short question. The language is a
exactly,
character of a book.
like you said, it's one of the characters. Yes. And it has a lot to do, so the Glass Garden has a lot to do with identity. And now talking about the importance of languages and identity, let's hear an extract in another language, which is very important for our identity. In bi prosila Marušo Majer, z nami je tudi igralka Maruša Majer, ki bo sedaj prebrala Odlomek Steklenega vrta v slovenščini.
Daj maslo, daj kislo smetano, daj jod, daj led, po hrbtu mi je teklo. V čevljih s krznom so se mi delali žulji in ritnici sta postali trdi kot oreh. Vsak dan sva skupaj zbirali steklenice, in to 2-krat. Dala mi je veliko vrečo, le da mi ni dovolila, da bi jo napolnila do vrha. Zamenjaj ramo, sem poslušala zjutraj in zvečer, zamenjaj težo, poravnaj hrbet. V desno ramo se je zarezala globoka, krvava črta, ki se ni pozdravila vse do dneva, ko je prišel Gorbačov. Moja leva rama je bila vedno otekla in me je pekla. Nikoli si nisem mislila, da me bo bolelo bolj kot v sirotišnici. Ko je nekega večera spoznala, da mi nič ne pomaga, mi je ponudila kozarec vodke, da se pomirim in ozdravim. Vodka je bila dobra, všeč mi je bila. Na dušek sem jo zvrnila in se vlegla na kavč, da bi se pogrela. Čutila sem, kot bi mi kdo od znotraj odiral vrat, a mi ni bilo neprijetno, ampak dobro. Pomislila sem, da je notri bolečina drugačna. Tamara Pavlovna ni rekla niti besede. Vzela je kozarec, natočila tudi sebi in ga potem še dolgo držala v roki. Vedela je, da je ravnala narobe. Med nama se je pojavil dogovor. Ko sem se jaz povzpela za en klin, je ona za 2 sestopila. Po svoji lestvici.
That's how you sound in the Slovenian language, Tatiana.
It's wonderful. I'm mesmerized to hear you know, the texts I wrote in different languages. Of course, I don't understand everything, but then you understand one word, and it's just like a hand given to you, because you just build up everything around it and you know what she's reading. So yeah, thank you very much.
Well, your story takes place in the capital of Moldova, in one part of the city with blocks of flats, but the courtyard, the yard, is a very important place. At times it seems very magical, but it's a place where at least two languages clash, the Russian and the Romanian.
Not only two languages, because the Chisinau I grew up, it was a Chisinau which today we would call a very cosmopolitan Chisinau, because we had Russians, Ukrainians, Moldovans, Jews, and when you're an adult, you are more or less busy and you go in and out, so you say hello, so it doesn't matter so much in what language. But when you're a child and you want to play and you are 10, you need a language. So for the city, it was Russian at the time. But in the same time, what you say about yard, it's true that yard was very important. It was a center of our universe. It was a very important place with implications, which, if you think, it was a whole geography, because in the yard you meet your neighbors, you play, you take your children out, you say goodbye to the deceased people. The yard was the face of people who lived there. So even if everything looked the same in Soviet Union, the yard was recognizable, because each yard had their own specific things. For instance, we had the polkovnik, which was a retired military who loved roses. So he managed to build in this very small portion we had in this yard, he managed to build one of the most fantastic gardens I ever seen, because this was his life, you know. So everyone brought something into the yard, an animal or their presence or a story, and it was a communal place. So yes, the yard was important. That's why it's alive in this book.
It's central stage, basically, right?
Yes,
for the story.
Everything is happening in the yard.
And it has certain rules to be followed.
Like everything else, yeah. Yes, when you have more than two people, you already need rules. So,
The characters you describe are very original. You mentioned some people you remember maybe from your childhood, but even does your work, your previous work as a journalist, help while you create all those characters? Very authentic people. When we read the story, it seems they're really very much alive. We can identify with them.
Well,
but still, they're very original.
I could say now that it took a long time, but actually it didn't, because most of them are real people from my childhood. But what you asked me about journalism is true, that I suppose that I understood this here in Slovenia, because it's the first time I'm asked about orphans. How did I know so well the life of orphans? Because I wasn't an orphan, and I didn't think about this before. And it's true that I know it very well, because as a journalist, I visited all orphanages in Moldova for my job. So I think that there is we had 100 or something, and I visited nearly everything. And probably when I was a child, I didn't realize that. But the life I saw later on profoundly marked me, because of course we didn't have a connection with orphans, because that was the monstrosity of a situation. If you are an orphan, you are placed in an institution and you live there for 10 years, and then you go out and then you are not an orphan anymore, because you don't exist in an institution. But then I wrote this book is but definitely is from the knowledge I gathered later on in life. So you see, I discovered one thing as well in Slovenia. I should probably reread the book, because I kind of forgot it, to see what else I will discover after visiting Slovenia. So yeah, it's important to travel sometime.
Yeah, but sometimes it's hard to reread. Do you often reread some
I don't
passages?
often, no, I nearly never read, but I reread this book after a few months, the war started, the war in Ukraine. I wanted to see if I would write other things differently, if I would rewrite something. And I feel that I did a good, an honest job, let's put it like that. It's subjective, of course, but I wouldn't change things because I wasn't too kind or too... I tried to tell a story as best as I could at the moment. Whether my attitude changed, yes, of course, because everything changed for us, for people who live in that region. Now everything is changed. It's like the biggest fear came to life, because you couldn't imagine in the worst scenario that Russia will invade Ukraine, that Russians will kill Ukrainians. As you said before, you never really saw the difference, even in languages, and you do travel a lot, from what I understand. But yes, this has happened, and I think that by reading this book, you can maybe understand a bit why does it happen.
It is. It captures. I think it captures the zeitgeist very well and the time we are living in. But you actually started writing literature when you stopped working as a journalist, and when you moved away from all these stories that you describe now, when you moved to Paris.
It's true. I didn't do that on purpose. I mean, I didn't move to Paris just to start writing books. I moved to Paris to get married, so it's another boring story. But it helped. It helped because I just my first book is a collection of short stories, and I just felt that I'm missing my language a lot. I didn't speak Romanian with anyone. I didn't have Romanian friends there, so obviously I was speaking French. With my husband, I was speaking English. I didn't have yet children. Alexander was just, I mean, yeah, he was born after, I mean, very soon after the book. So I think that I really felt as a sort of physical void of language. We didn't have Skype at the time, so I didn't speak with my mom. And I started writing. That was my way to connect to Moldova, to a language, really. The second book was different, because the second book came as a collection of frustrations and fears, because the children were small. I always had this constant fear that I'm not a good mother, I'm not doing enough. I am a very good mother, I must say. I'm sure my son will read that book one day and he'll say, okay, well. But what I'm saying is that this third book came easy, but in the same time more difficult, because this was the first book which I didn't have to make up things. So it was a book with most of things happening to me, to my country. This was a real geography. People could just go to Kišinjevu, follow the book, and they will find the courtyard, they will find the trolley bus, they will find things in the book. And I know that my Netherlands translator did that, actually.
She was following it. And you posted on Facebook.
Yes.
You posted the stories on Facebook.
Yes, but she Charlotte van Roden is her name, so she went to Kišinjevu, and she even looked at the monument. she just did the same tracé like Lastochka. So in a way, I recreated a sort of a small part of Moldova in this book, maybe to be easier to carry it with me. But also, I think that this is a book of my generation. Unfortunately, half of my generation is abroad, living in different countries, because migration is very high in Moldova. And this is the generation in between. This is a generation which sort of never left, but never arrived quite so. Children who are born in different countries, but maybe not so much, speaking Romanian. So these people always felt a bit between everything, between culture, between identities, because we are Romanians, but not everyone is Romanian living in Moldova. So in a way, this book came easy because it was about us, but I felt more pressed to, I don't know, to tell the truth, because, it wasn't only about me.
So was it more organized, more planned than the first or the second one?
The first one was a crazy thing. I mean, the first one I wrote it so fast and without thinking about anything, because it was a sort of first serious book, and I wasn't sure what I'm doing. I just sit down and wrote it. The second one, I felt more responsible, and it was also coming from, in a place where probably everyone would compare it, the first one. But also is the book where people can recognize themselves, children who grew up with me, my schoolmates. It was a book which I wanted to do it well or at all. And to be honest, I thought that only 10 people will read it, like my mom and her friends whom she was forcing all the time to read my books, maybe some people who knew me in school. But actually it surprised me that it found readers in other languages, in other countries, with a sort of ease I never thought it will happen.
Let's listen to another extract in the Slovenian language. Maruša, bi vas še enkrat povabila na oder, še en odlomek iz romana Stekleni vrt.
Spominjam se Tamare Pavlovne, najnega dvorišča, vseh tistih let. In glede na to, kar vem danes, vem, da to ni pravično. Vajna laž je pomračila vse moje spomine. Ko hodim po mestu, pomislim, da bi lahko živela v isti ulici. Da bi lahko bila starka na vogalu trgovine ali pa starec z nogavicami vrh škornjev. Kot jaz se tudi on boji, da mu ne bi spodrsnilo. Je on moj oče. Morda pa nista revna. Morda sta, potem ko sta me odvrgla na smetišče, lahko visoko in svobodno poletela v življenje, o kakršnem sta sanjala. Morda. Vsa ta leta me je mučila misel, da je bilo to, da sta me pustila nekaj dobrega, da se je splačalo. Še laži si nista znala izbrati kot ljudje. Od začetka pa vse do konca sta bila psa. Tudi iz mene sta hotela narediti psico. V Bukarešti ves čas sneži, v moji glavi pa se mešata jezika. Moji možgani so zakrneli. V katerem jeziku naj vaju iščem? V katerem jeziku naj vama odpustim? Zakaj vama ni nihče povedal, da bi bilo bolje, da ostaneta mrtva? Mrtva bi me bolj ljubila. Mrtva bi vaju bolj ljubila.
So we were talking about that when you moved to Paris, you started writing in the Romanian language, but as well motherhood was a very important moment for you and for your writing.
Yes, it's true, because I think that motherhood is, you can think anything you want about it, hate it, love it, desire it, but until it's happening, you don't know what it can do to you. When I was young, I never really thought I'm going to be the mother type. I never desired so much children. There are women who know forever that they want to be mothers, and they are mothers, and they are happy. For me, it wasn't that. I was probably aiming more for a career than for motherhood. And probably that was part of my success as a journalist, because it seemed that nothing can touch me. So I was always sent to these places where it was about death, about violence, about, heavy stuff. And I would still be able to keep my head and report. But then I became a mother and everything changed. It's like I was looking back in my life and I was suffering from all the things I've seen in past, and I didn't suffer properly, So these things changed, because automatically I found in my heart a sort of filter which never was there, and everything I saw I was filtering like okay, what does this mean for a child? What does this mean for a mother who has a child? Because I did have children. But that was the first book. And, you know, I always had my audience, but audience is always changing, because people who read the first book, they couldn't read the second, because they hated me for that. They just couldn't believe that this nice young woman, blonde, calm, could write something so bad about women, could write something so violent about women. And I'm very glad I did, because Moldovan society is a very patriarchal society. I'm not going to go now into the discussions whether this is good or bad. This is how it is. But the pressure on women is huge, because a woman in Moldova is judged according to her children and to her motherhood. So once you become a mother, everything you do, it will be judged through your children. Like, are you a good mother or you are not a good mother? Of course, the other roles never took them back. I mean, you still have to cook, to be beautiful, to serve, to do your job. So I'm glad that that book sort of distressed a bit the society, and we started these discussions, the honest discussions, like why woman has to be at the core of everything. Why is it not, you know, okay from time to time to fail, to not to be perfect? Because mothers are women and they are alive, they're not like rocks, you know. It's okay for a mother to be unhappy as well. It's okay for a mother to shout. It's okay for a mother to be asking for help. So for me, that book changed everything, because I felt a bit of change as well in around me, in the narrative, and that is important, I think, because the mother from that book, she wasn't poor, she wasn't stupid, she wasn't unhappy in a sort of unclear way. It's just that she wasn't loved enough, and she couldn't share that love with her son in the way he wanted. And I think it is important for us to talk about these things. I was asking some journalists before today, how do they describe Slovenian society, whether it is a society where woman is still at the core of everything, where she has to work more, she has to do more efforts, and everyone said yes. So I think that from that perspective, we are not so far away as countries, because it's equality doesn't mean that the burden is shared, you know, equally. Equality means that you are allowed maybe to take even a bigger burden on you. But that is my first book. We are talking about this one, and there is a lot of violence here. There is a lot of unfairness. But it's not invented. And I would like to say that, oh, leave it. It was 50 years ago. Now we are in a better place. Unfortunately, not always we are in a better place. Some things changed, but some things are the same. And if you think that after 50 years, we may say that a book like that is actual, that's unfair.
And women are still central in this story as well. And the way you do it, you can be so brutal.
I'm a woman.
you can be so brutal, but then you put a soft layer on it.
I don't believe in these contrasts. You know, we are very quick to judge nowadays things, to say this is black and this is white, this is bad and this is good. I find in life it's not always like that. I believe in half tones. I believe in middle ways, because I don't believe in complete happiness, and I don't believe in complete unhappiness. I never met people living this kind of lives. I think that I'm always asked why I'm so harsh towards my characters. Why don't I make a sort of better endings? Because we are not at Hollywood. Because rarely in life a person has difficulties, everything is bad, she has, let's take about the character, everything is bad in her life, and at the end somehow in one day and a half, things are changing dramatically and she becomes so happy. It's never happening like that. But you learn how to be happy in a quiet way. You learn how to be happy in small things, in intimate things. I call this a sort of quiet happiness, and I believe in that more. The same with beauty, the same with success. Or I think that my parents' generation, they didn't have social media, of course, but they didn't share so much of things with others. And perhaps that's why when you had a small happiness in the family, you just appreciate it as it's the main event of the year. But today we need strong colors, we need strong words, we need approval from other people to show that we are always happy, that everything is always good. I don't believe in this.
You describe from time to time these short little moments of happiness happening in the kitchen quite often. Women pickling cucumbers.
Yes.
Or
it's still one of my favorite moments. You know, I'm not doing picklings, but I remember this was wonderful, and it still is. If you go in Moldova, especially in countryside in autumn, where we have lots of fruits and vegetables, it's a sort of happiness to be able to gather as women, to pickle things, to wash those fruits. The children are around you, the stories are there, lots of conflicts are solved around the pickling season, lots of things are arranged then.
Lots of truth are told, right?
Yes,
Lots
and
of
then
truth.
you think that, of course, you could go to a supermarket and buy all that stuff, but at the same time, the humanity of it disappears. And I think that kitchen was one of the happiest places in people's lives, especially in the city, where you didn't have your garden, you couldn't go out like you do when you are in a village. But what do you have? You have kitchen, because that is the smell, that is the texture, that is the happiness. When you are unhappy, you go in the kitchen and you cry. You don't want children to see you in bed, you hide in the kitchen. When you maybe want to kiss your husband so the children will see you, go to the kitchen. When the friends come, you go to the kitchen. Kitchen was our the red flag of our geography. I still have dreams about kitchen.
And it is all here in this book.
It is.
As well. It's a different place than the courtyard.
Yeah.
We have a nice audience as well. Can we see our audience? Lahko malo prižgemo tudi luči, da se malo bolje vidimo. Namreč ne bi rada, da sem tu sama, ki se sprehajam po tej zgodbi. Vem, da je med vami veliko bralcev, ljubiteljev literature. Maybe this is a moment, we have a lot of ladies today in the audience as well. And maybe this is a nice moment just to greet Aleš Mustar as well, who was your translator from the Romanian language into the Slovenian. Aleš, lepo, da ste danes z nami. Pa vendarle naj bo to priložnost, da zastavimo tudi kakšno vprašanje z vaše strani. Prepričana sem, da se je odprlo marsikaj, kak lep spomin, pa tudi vprašanje za našo pisateljico. Maybe we have an interesting question from the audience as well. Da vidimo, kdo se upogumi. Imamo tudi mikrofon, lahko vprašate v slovenščini, pa potem pomagamo.
Well, while you are thinking about the question, I just want to, I don't want us to forget Aleš so fast, because I think that it's important for people to know, for readers to know that sometimes between a book they like and the writer who wrote it, there is a very important person, which is translator. Because in small languages, and Slovenia is a small country, and Moldova is a small country. So these two small countries couldn't really meet so fast or easy or with a pleasure like we do today if it wouldn't be an enthusiastic person somewhere to read it in a language, to like it, and then to feel that this urge to translate it in another language. And I feel extremely lucky, because all the journalists I met today, they all said that it's a wonderful book, we love your book, which means that Aleš did some writing for himself in that book, because when a desire to read the book, and the book is readable so easy, it means that the translator did wonders. And having a poet for translator is just even a bigger luck.
It does come very naturally. Yes. It does come over very, very naturally. Dobro, veselim se kakšnega vprašanja tudi z vaše strani. Mislim, da smo imeli eno roko, smo videli koga. Ja? Ne bo se nihče? No questions. So we were very intense today. We said a lot of beautiful things, very interesting things. It was really nice that you shared so many personal thoughts as well. Are you writing something new? Are you thinking about, is there another story coming up right now in the Romanian?
Yeah, I do. I am in the middle of writing something, and I didn't do it for many years, but it seems now that it came back to me, the joy of writing, this feeling of being able to sort of communicate with paper, with a computer. So I'm writing a book, yes, now. So I hope that this year it will be published.
Because you were silent for quite some time now after The Glass.
Well, it's a process. You know, after every book, I feel like I've said it all, and I will never write anything else. But then I slowly start writing notes for my children, like the food is there, or do your room, or and then it comes to me, and I'm accustomed to the writing again. I think it's just a matter of being emptied, and then you just need some time to put something instead, and then to transform it into a feeling, and it can be a different one every time. And now I have something which works, and I hope to finish it. But I also have a question for you. I know that you're traveling a lot. So after reading this book, for instance, if you would go to Moldova, what would be the first thing you would want to see?
The pickling.
Okay.
No, because I do stories about people, and I felt very close to everything you described. I was traveling your country as well, and Romania as well. And I have a favorite word in Romanian language, which is roșii. Roșii.
Yeah,
it sounds so nice.
Tomatoes.
Yeah. I like tomatoes as well, but the word for that is very, very nice as well.
But it also means red.
Red.
Yeah.
So it's a word that I really remembered, and it just sounds beautiful. The language is very particular, and it's so nice. You can even understand it when you read it, when you see it written. It's much easier. It has lots of Italian kind of.
Yes, I found lots of words in Slovenian as well. For instance, today it was a very funny word, which is the same like in Romanian. It's called odrasla.
Yes.
So I felt, because odrasla, it's something very archaic. My grandmother would say odrasla. It's just from there. And then I love when people say hvala, because hvala in my mind is always a sort of praise. So I feel very religiously close to. You go to a supermarket, and when you feel like you're in a church, because it's hvala.
So are your kids now part of the adventure in the Romanian language?
I think this is the question where I should lie and say, yes, of course, no. But I have a mechanism to oblige them to sort of speak, because my mom is coming soon to visit. And then my mom, she's a sort of pancake machine. And they love pancakes because they're half French now. And then my mom comes, I could just see her with this thing. So she's talking to them, okay, we don't watch. And then she's making like 100 of them in 2 minutes. And then they are coming and they have to speak Romanian. With me, they just say, come on, just speak something else. So it's difficult. It's difficult to keep children in love with a language which they don't need. Because for adults, we have different attitude towards a language. We can miss it, or we can feel the obligation to speak it. It's the language of our past. But children love a language only if they need it. So if it helps them to pass a message or to communicate, they use it. But if not, they just don't. But I hope that will change.
Well, there's a reason they call it the mother's tongue.
Yeah, well, I should probably make a clause in my will saying you are obliged to read all my books in original. Then
but it's good. It started to happen in the kitchen as well, in your case.
Yeah,
with
okay. Yeah. It's in the kitchen.
It's a kitchen
it's
again.
Always the way.
Tatiana, thank you so much.
Thank you as
for
well.
time. And you will stay a couple of minutes with us. There are lots of people who might buy your book. You're here to sign as well. Torej, ostanite v naši družbi, približajte se nam kar pogumno, tudi z veseljem Tatjana podpiše kakšno knjigo in predvsem uživajte v branju še naprej. Lepo, da ste danes prišli v takem številu. Hvala vam.
Thank you.